Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Sister Salina, and we're hosting the Legal Hour. Usually I am accompanied by my husband, who's currently at court, but he might be joining us a little bit later on. Wishing everyone a happy Ramzan Mubarak to everyone. Hope everyone is having a good Ramzan so far. And what we are going to talk about today is the impact that COVID-19 has had on the legal industry. So first of all, a little bit about myself. I work in criminal defense. I'm a criminal defense solicitor. And what that means is primarily I deal with representing clients at the police station, at the magistrate's court, and also preparing cases for the Crown Court matters. And now we normally deal with clients who are charged or facing a criminal charge, or who have been arrested on suspicion of an offence and taken to the police station. Now, normally this show is hosted by my husband and I. We're both criminal defence practitioners. We held a similar show last year whereby we went through the legal procedures, what one can expect once they're arrested at a police station, and also when they attend at their first appearance at the magistrate's court, and also how the case evolves all the way down to the Crown Court and to the appeal stage, if that's applicable. We also went through different series in terms of the types of offences that one is normally arrested for and taken to the police station, an individual's rights and the procedure there, and also what can be expected when you first attend at the magistrate's court. Now, with COVID-19, it's been a year of uncertainty for a lot of people. It's affected a lot of industries, it's affected a lot of people and their livelihood. Now, solicitors and barristers remained key workers during the lockdown period, so we were still required to go to court, we were still required to attend police stations. However, what had happened was there was a shift in terms of the actual attendance. So a lot of attendance had taken place remotely. Now, we saw that especially at the police stations. So when an individual was arrested and taken to the police station, because there was a need to have social distancing, what that meant was that solicitors appeared remotely as opposed to physically attending the police station. That was usually done via something similar to Zoom, it was called Teams, or via phone conversations. Now, the main issues that solicitors initially faced with telephone consultations was things like confidentiality with their client, whether that was being maintained, and also trying to advance their client's best interest, doing things remotely, because of course we weren't able to go into police stations physically, be present as we normally would have done. So that was a challenge initially to start off with. But with all things, initially you have the teething problems, but with modern era of technology, that's something that was resolved quite quickly in terms of being able to provide good advice over the telephone, over Teams, and still reassure your clients, which is the most important thing, because you're not physically present at the police station. So there was a lot of interviews that took place remotely, and the challenges with those were again not being physically present, but of course the safety was paramount, making sure that everybody was safe and secure, and we couldn't have too many people at one place at a police station. And usually the consultation rooms and usually the interview rooms are fairly small, so they're not spacious in that regard. So we had a lot of interviews remotely that have been held, and it seems like that's is still the case with a lot of police stations across the country, and it seems to be the preferred method at the moment until we have the all clear in terms of going back to normal as to how things used to be. In regards to the magistrates court, there are a few applications where solicitors appear remotely. Even prosecutors at the court will appear remotely. We've had instances at the Crown Court where judges have been appearing remotely, because we have a lot of judges who tend to be a lot senior in terms of their age, and whether they're shielding or have other sort of health issues. And that was another factor that had to be taken into consideration. So a lot of remote hearings at the Crown Court and at the Magistrates Court. Now, we have seen a recent increase now in terms of the Magistrates Court, people physically attending and representing clients. I personally prefer attending physically because you have more of that interaction. I've had a few police station interviews over the telephone, and I just tend to take a little bit longer sort of dealing with those, because you want to ensure that your client fully understands everything that is being said to them, the reason why they're arrested, and also to be aware, just to make them aware of their rights. And the other sort of difficulty and challenge has been with people's sort of mental health. It's sometimes difficult to sort of gauge that or to communicate over the telephone if a client particularly has mental health needs. And in those circumstances, what you would do as a solicitor is you would speak to the custody sergeant and try and make arrangements to go down to the police station and represent the clients there in person, and try and see if further provisions can be made to sort of facilitate that. Increasingly at the Magistrates Court, a lot of people have been attending as opposed to remote attendances. In terms of the impact from COVID, there has been a lot of backlog with the cases, because there was a period with the lockdown, the courts were not up to that stage where they could deal with cases, large number of cases remotely. It took a lot of teething issues there in terms of getting the IT system. A lot of courts didn't have the strong Wi-Fi, or they didn't have all the facilities in all the courtrooms to have a video link. So it was something that they had to sort of work around. We also saw loads of Nightingale courts opened to provide working hours beyond your 5:30 court opening times, so that they can work during the evenings and they can deal with a lot of the cases that had stacked up. We saw a lot of cases being adjourned, trial cases being set for 2 to 3 years in the future, which means, again, adding to the backlog of cases and trying to deal with the more serious cases, those with more vulnerable witnesses and clients, defendants. So we saw a whole range of issues that were being presented during the COVID-19 process. And of course, with a lot of firms, private practices, criminal defense firms, because no longer courts were running, police stations were not running as much as they used to. A lot of businesses were struggling financially in terms of making ends meet. Now, a lot of criminal defense work is legal aid work. So even with the solicitors, the kind of work that they carry out for most of their clients is legally aided. So those who do not have the means to afford private legal work, they have to apply to the legal aid, and it's based upon 2 factors. So usually their income, how much they earn, whether they're eligible for legal aid, and whether it's in the public interest to fund that case. So sometimes, there was a lot of issues with that. Those are the 2 considerations that have to be taken into place, whether there's a public interest and whether in terms of their income. where the legal aid is available. Now, a lot of firms were struggling with court closures, with cases not being able to go through, and also with police stations, the delay, and some police stations not dealing with cases. There were some police stations and so many courts that were not equipped to deal with COVID-19, and they had to close. And that meant other courts had to take on the work, and they were trying to deal with those. So that and then created a further delay. And of course, there's only a certain number of people that could be at court at any one time. And with the increasing amount of remote appearances, and again, with the IT infrastructure, trying to get that sorted. So there was a lot going on in the background. A lot of criminal firms struggled financially to pay their employees, to make ends meet. So, of course, with the government furlough scheme, it meant that a lot of lawyers, a lot of solicitors did go on furlough for a lengthy period of time. And there were some who were working relentlessly hard throughout the period. So it was really difficult for those who were on furlough, and again, for those who were working, because it was a lot more concentrated for them. And for those on furlough, again, it was very difficult for them being out of work and adjusting, or perhaps working from home, having, children and other commitments, and trying to balance that. So a lot of impact on an individual's mental health, both the clients, the profession, and I think everybody during lockdown in so many different respects. So that was, again, another challenge of working through COVID and trying to uphold the system and keep that running, as it were. So solicitors were key workers. We carried on working, carried on trying to keep the wheels running on the justice system. Of course, things are gradually getting a lot better. We still have the remote attendances at police stations, but there are increasing number of people who are also attending police stations. Again, at the magistrates' court, you've got a lot of people who are also attending. Cases are being progressed. But due to the backlog in terms of the Crown Court and having your jury cases, again, that's usually 12 members of jury, 12 ordinary members of the public who form the jury. With the courts, it's trying to have spaces that are socially distanced, and jury members being in a room where their safety comes first as well, in terms of making sure that there's no spread of the infection. So there's proposals at the moment with actually having remote juries, and that's something that's being looked into in greater detail by the Ministry of Justice, and whether that's going to be something that will be workable in order to get the cases back on. We've got a number of people who are still waiting with their cases pending, some with, oh, sorry, one moment. Yeah, so, sorry, we've just got a few messages, so I'm just going to respond to those. Just give me one moment. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I normally co-host this show with my husband, who was stuck in court when we started the show, but he's available now, so I'll pass it on to him to just say hello to everyone as well.
Assalamualaikum. I think this is Radio Ramzan First, broadcasting live from a court in South London. Sorry for the delay in joining the meeting. And as Salina mentioned, I was just held up in court. But yeah, Ramzan Mubarak to everyone. What a year it's been so far. And it's had a great impact on each individual's lives. It's also had a great impact on the criminal justice system, which we'll go into more detail as our 4-part series for this show continues over the forthcoming weeks. I'm not sure where Salina got to in her introduction because I wasn't listening. But
No, that's fine. I was just giving a brief background of some of the areas that we covered last year, and also again about the impact that COVID-19 has had on the legal justice system, particularly the remote attendances throughout police stations and also initially at the magistrates court, and just the difficulty with all the backlog of cases, especially at the Crown Court, with trying to have your jury there, and having a safe environment. So those are some of the matters that I had discussed.
yeah, so technology has certainly kicked off in the criminal justice system, as Salina's mentioned. A number of police station interviews are conducted over the phone, via Zoom, via Teams. This saves having to have extra people in an interview room, and it facilitates social distancing. So the client can get the advice over the phone, it's confidential, and the solicitor hears what's taking place in the interview room and can intervene as and when necessary. Working from home has also kicked off quite a bit, given that people are not attending offices. But I mean, we live in a paperless environment, particularly the criminal justice system. All the Crown Court cases are on a digital case system. We don't work with physical paper as such. So it hasn't presented many challenges. It's actually quite convenient. You can be at a police station in London, and then in the next hour you could be at a police station in Manchester or Leicester, Ibrahim's neck of the woods. But yeah, so in that regard, it is quite convenient, saves traveling to these locations, zero emissions, so doing our bit for the environment, and whilst achieving the same outcome, which is representing your client at every stage in the proceedings. But yes, there is a current 50,000 case backlog in the Crown Courts. There are plans to extend this remote hearings where even juries can participate in a trial potentially online via Zoom, where you have two jurors dialed in, the defendant there, the defense barrister, the prosecution barrister there, and the judge, and effectively have a trial for a serious case online. I know there are a number of defense practitioners who have a view about that. But as with everything that's new, it does have teething problems to start from, but as they develop, those problems iron out. But this 50,000 case backlog needs to be reduced, and one way of reducing it is having more trials online. I don't know how Salina's found, she doesn't like attending via remote hearing. She prefers to attend in person. As do I, because I find it's more stressful attending via Teams meeting or
Yeah, I
Zoom.
agree. I think it takes a lot longer as well in terms of remotely, because there's a lot more that you have to take into account. Whereas when you're there physically in person, it's a lot easier in terms of the communication. Things are a lot more efficient. Whereas remotely, there's a lot of waiting around at times as well. I found. Do you find the same with that?
Yeah, there is quite a lot of waiting around, and I find that clients appreciate it a lot more as well if you attend in person, because a lot of this job is about interaction. But whilst at the same time, we've got to bear in mind we can't have an overcrowded courtroom because then it's not COVID secure. So it's a balancing exercise. If it's a simple hearing which can be dealt with via a video link, then it should be. If it's a bit more complicated, and the client's preferences are that you attend in person, but yes, the public safety should be paramount, and we, as defence practitioners, do everything we can to ensure that the court is COVID compliant. So yes, in the round, it is quite difficult to conduct a hearing online. I mean, even with technical issues, sometimes there's lagging. That's not necessarily the court's issue. It could be your own wireless connection. Could be a number of reasons, but the lagging and the delay is sometimes quite difficult to overcome.
I was saying earlier as well, in terms of with the teething issues initially, I mean, some courts were not quite prepared to deal with all of the sort of initially with the problems when it arose with COVID. They weren't necessarily prepared to have all the video links. They didn't have all the IT infrastructure. So again, that took a bit of time to implement within the courts as well.
Yes, it's a fast track exercise there. I mean, the progress they've made as far as technology is concerned and the financial investment that they've made in the last year, I don't think that much investment in technology has been made within the last 10 to 15 years. All the equipment is in the process of being upgraded in the courtroom, all the screens, the wireless connections. So all of that is taking place. But it's a slow exercise, and once the predicted lockdown, well, the restrictions come to an end, the prediction is the tail end of June, we'll know what the state of the criminal justice system is then, and what the plans are as far as the government are concerned as to how they want to tackle this backlog of cases in the Crown Court, 50,000 backlog of cases in the Crown Court. And that sort of backlog not only impacts on the person charged with the offence, it also impacts on the person that's making the allegation. So delay overall is not good.
I agree, but I think one good thing that you pointed out earlier was the fact with the flexibility that remote and sort of online provides, that you can be sitting in London and covering a matter, let's say in Manchester or Leicester. So it's kind of makes it a lot closer in terms of the access that you can have and where you can represent your client. So it makes it a much smaller world in that sense. And also with the added sort of investment with technology, I mean, I think that's always a good thing. But as well as having the options there to attend in person when there is a requirement. And of course, it's that sort of all-rounded experience. But for more simple hearings, simple matters, I think definitely it's good to have that option to do things remotely. And the other thing is with a lot of offices, I think they've come to a realization that they don't really need the large office spaces and they don't really need that many offices. And a lot of people have actually been really productive as opposed to in terms of working from home. But one consideration would be just to have that kind of environment at home where you can actually work, because the danger of that is again, your work-life balance. There isn't a real divide there if you're working from home, and as opposed to before when we used to physically attend an office and you used to have that interaction there with other colleagues, share ideas or discuss a case and get a different perspective. So there's not much of that now as what we used to have before.
Yes, what conducting these hearings from home, there's always that danger, and I'm sure many of you have read various stories, mainly abroad, of hearings that have taken place where unfortunate things have happened during the hearing, whether it's stuff happening in the background, or there was one article I was reading, some prosecutor, some lawyer in the US, his face was coming up as a cat, and the judge was saying he was saying to the judge, "I'm not a cat. I'm the defense attorney." Someone had obviously put a filter on his laptop, and he didn't know how to remove it. But yeah, that was quite amusing. But no such story in the UK yet. But we, I did have a professional colleague of mine. She accidentally dialed into the Old Bailey, the most serious, the court in London which tries the most serious cases. She accidentally, I don't know how she accidentally did this, but she dialed into the Old Bailey, one of the courtrooms, in her pajamas. Yeah, it wasn't a pleasant experience for her. So yeah, sometimes you're given the wrong link for the wrong courtroom, and you end up in a place where you're not supposed to be, and everyone's taken by surprise. But yeah, there are teething problems, which I'm sure as time goes on, they'll rectify themselves. But in the round, a lot of progress has been made as far as dealing with hearings and
Yeah, I mean, on a positive note, there has been a lot of progress. Cases are going through the system again. There are cases now going to the Crown Court, being given a date, albeit some of up 2 or 3 years into the future. But the more sort of simple cases, we are seeing those going through, and things slowly but steadily getting back up to pace. So that's always good.
yeah, I mean practically as well in the courtroom, there's this plastic sheet installed in front of the judge's bench between jurors to ensure social distancing. No air particles, interact with anyone else's air particles. Um, so all of that logistical, not just technological, but physical changes have been made to the courtroom. The courts only list a certain number of cases in a day, so it's not overwhelmed with so many people waiting in the waiting area, and then it becomes hard to facilitate social distancing. But all the courts are now prepared to deal with physical attendances in terms as far as safety precautions are concerned, and there is an extension, additional courtrooms being conducted from certain hotels, Nightingale courts. I don't know whether Salina's mentioned Nightingale court.
Very, very briefly, I mentioned that about the Nightingale courts to try and deal with all the backlog and hear cases. And the other thing I was going to mention when you said about the logisticals at court, I actually find it quite difficult to even find a seat at court sometimes, where you have your laptop and various other bits and pieces, and you just want to have a little seat just to kind of do things. You find a lot of tape all around the waiting room seating, so it's quite difficult to sometimes find a seat.
Yeah, it's all taped up with yellow tape, so you can't sit. But that's again to facilitate social distancing, um, which in this climate is paramount. Um, but yeah, it is difficult to find a seat and to find a conference room to have a private meeting with your client. But if it's remote, then you just have it over the phone with the client. So that's still private and confidential. Nightingale courts, what one courtroom can have, like a typical Crown Court can have multiple courtrooms. For example, 6, 7. It doesn't necessarily mean every court is sitting. So, for example, you could have a trial going on in courtroom 1, and then courtroom 2 is being used for the jury to spread out and deliberate between themselves, because the deliberation room in the back is not big enough to facilitate social distancing. I know that they're doing that at certain courts in London, so it can be somewhat misleading to think that, oh, there's 6 courtrooms in this particular Crown Court, why can't all of them be running at the same time? So there are various considerations that the court staff and the court managers have to take into account, so far as the jury is concerned. Because the
Of
judges
course.
say if he or she is sitting on his bench, quite considerably far away from everyone else, and normally quite high up.
I was saying as well, also with some judges at the Crown Court, I've read that they've had to appear remotely as well, given, a lot of the judges tend to be quite elderly at the Crown Court. So with any other sort of health issues and stuff, we've seen some judges appear remotely as well in the Crown Court.
Yes, that's been quite effective as well, and it ensures that they're able to conduct the hearings while staying safe themselves. If a number of them are shielding, then their health is protected, whilst at the same time they're able to carry out the job that they're doing. But I mean, if anyone does have any questions in relation to the logistical changes that have been made or the criminal justice system overall, then do feel free to call in. You're listening to Radio Ramzan. We're live on 87.9 online, on YouTube and on Facebook. Do give us a call. It'll be interesting to listen to your stories.
Let's just. The number, if you do want to call, is 077 614 60614. That's 077 614 60614. So send us your text messages or give us a call with any questions that you have.
Just coming back to the police stations stage, we went over this last year. As we've already mentioned, there have been quite drastic changes as far as representation is concerned. So when an individual is arrested, they're taken to the police station. The police have up to 24 hours to keep them there initially. As we've already mentioned, during the COVID period, what's changed is the fact that the solicitor doesn't necessarily attend in person, but he's over the phone and he's there available to provide advice to anyone arrested at the police station, rather than physically attending court and making that travel journey. So that's for the benefit of those that have just joined us. We're just in the process of discussing the changes to the criminal justice system over this 12-month period and what impact COVID-19 has had on the criminal justice system and how it's responding. Its response has mainly been to conduct matters online via Teams or via Zoom, or we call it the common platform, whereby we're just given a link to appear in the courtroom and we appear on a video screen. So the response has been really good, I would say. They have responded very quickly. Initially, there were teething problems, but that's with everything. But now we are, I would say, fully up and running. And
More steady position.
yeah,
A much more steady position. The other thing that I was mentioning earlier was the impact that it's had on criminal defense firms itself. A lot of firms initially really struggled financially as well, given the impact that it's had on the courts and on the police station. So how difficult it was for them, and of course the lifeline that the government provided with the furlough scheme, which meant that a lot of firms had to furlough a considerable amount of their employees.
yeah, that's really important. The impact, it's not only had on the criminal justice system, but defense firms which are part of the criminal justice system. Um, and I didn't have the benefit of listening to I think it's the mind hour, the mental health hour. But I'm sure the mental impact it's had on individuals this 12-month period, it's quite severe. I mean, there are already whistleblowers within Her Majesty's prison service that are saying that that prisoners are kept in their cell for up to 23 and a half hours a day, and um, some senior officials are saying it's a ticking time bomb as far as mental health is concerned, to the point that people are going grey in the face, just locked up for 23 and out, up to 23 and a half hours a day. So it has been challenging. Yes, furlough was a lifeline, but some colleagues I've spoken to, they found it difficult to be on furlough. Often, when they share that with other people, they're met with quite a weird response that, oh, you're getting 80% of your salary, or in some cases 100% of your salary for just sitting at home and doing nothing. Whereas it's not just that easy when you've established a routine, you've got a 9 to 5 routine, Monday to Friday. It's not just a matter of just switching off, and even though you're getting paid, um, money is not the only consideration. So a lot of people, whilst being on furlough, did find it mentally challenging, that sudden and dramatic change.
I think on that note, when you said money isn't the only consideration, especially with defense practitioners, I mean, money is not what drives a defense lawyer, because we're not really on the big salary as people would assume. Whereas with defense, a lot of the clients and the work is legally aided. So it's not like, you're making loads on private cases. You're doing the job and you're doing the work because you actually care about it and you want to ensure that you help those individuals. And sometimes it's, you're against the police, you're against the prosecuting authorities, you're against all these massive organizations who are bringing a case against an individual. And as a defense practitioner, you're the person fighting their corner. So it's not something that we do for money. It's something that you do because
So
you
this
have
is
that
another,
genuine desire.
yes, depending on which newspaper or tabloid or whatever you read. Yes, criminal defense lawyers do not work for the money. They're not driven by money. You can go on Twitter, go online, read the stories of real life living barristers, and hear what they've got to say. Junior barristers. I was speaking to a barrister the other day. She was at court for 12 hours for £50. And even that, she wouldn't get paid until her chambers get paid. So it is really difficult. I mean, 50 divided by 12, maths has never been a strong point for me, but yeah, I think it works out less than £5 an hour. But the amount of work they have to put in, the amount of preparation, given that someone's liberty is on the line, it's not a responsibility that should be taken lightly. A
No.
number of these junior barristers, they prepare for their case all night, in preparation for their hearing, because they want to do a proper job. They want to represent their clients in the best way they can, because at the end of the day, you're the only person protecting your client and protecting his interests. And this word criminal defense lawyers, I prefer human rights lawyers, because we are in essence protecting people's rights, the right to a fair trial, the right to fair disclosure, um, are some of the rights we are protecting, and those rights are enshrined in law. So that's the essence of our job.
And we will cover more detailed areas in in our upcoming shows. But it's been a great pleasure going back on Radio Ramzan and being hosts again and providing the legal hour to everyone. And we hope that it's been of benefit and of interest. And we hope to join you all soon again. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.